Hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this week, and we're going to be diving into a full moon in Gemini. Very action-packed. It's conjunct Mars. There is going to be some tension, some heat, but hopefully also some motivation to kind of get some things moving, get some things done, and very passionate if nothing else. Do me a favor, make sure you're subscribed. Click the button below. So if you're new to my channel, you're getting alerts as to when I have new content coming out. We have horoscopes monthly, monthly overviews. We do weekly astro weather on Sundays, and obviously new and full moon videos. Lots of stuff to help you plan accordingly and kind of know what's going on in the cosmos. So let's go ahead and jump right into it and take a look at what's going to be taking place with some of the aspects of this lunation. And then I will also take you through 12 of the rising signs and make my predictions for how this full moon is going to affect you. So make sure you stay tuned until the end for that. And I'll be pulling some tarot cards for you guys as well. So we have got this full moon in Gemini coming in hot on December the 7th, 2022. This is going to be taking place at 8:08 p.m. Pacific time, 11:08 p.m. Eastern time. Obviously, I know we have people all over the globe, so at least here in the US, it's going to be taking place on the 7th, but we will see it taking place in different time zones, and it's kind of bleeding into even other days in other parts of the world. So you might kind of hear a variation of dates depending on where it is that you guys live. But with full moons, you feel it up to a couple days before and a couple days after. So leave about buffer of 3 days on each side. It doesn't necessarily mean something has to happen the day of the full moon. In many situations, this is like a harvesting period of things that we have been working on for 6 months' time. Now, this is a pretty significant full moon. Part of the reason why is because it's very strongly tied to the Mars retrograde in Gemini. So if you guys haven't already seen the videos I did on that, I took you through all of the transits before Mars went retrograde, and I did another video that was a presentation. I did a whole presentation on Mars retrograde. It was a free webinar that I put out. May be helpful to kind of get a refresher to have an idea of like what's going on, where this is taking place in your chart, and all the various dates that are unfolding over time. But the full moon is highlighting this retrograde because it is literally less than a degree conjunct the moon. So Mars being in conjunction is very passionate, very heated. So it's going to kind of put a flame under our backsides and get us going into motion. Now, 16 degrees in general in degree astrology has a connection to the sign of Taurus, right? So this is anything in regards to, Cancer. This is Cancer. Hello, I'm trying to math in my head here. It's associated with the sign of Cancer. So it's going to deal with emotional reactions. Hi, full moon conjunct Mars. But more in a Cancerian sense where we're emotional, we're expressing our emotions, we're talking about our emotions, Gemini. We may be finding that we're moving, or there's movement going on within our home or our families, or there's just more action going on at home. Obviously, this is the full moon that kind of marks getting ready, getting prepared for the holiday season. We always have a Gemini full moon when the sun is in Sagittarius. Now, what makes a full moon is when we have the sun in its polar opposite sign to the moon. So it represents like this climax where the sun in one sign is shining a light on where there is going to be the most action, where there's the most physical kind of change going on. And then the moon represents that emotional kind of reflection of how we're feeling, how we're moving through things. And the moon is the planet that moves the fastest. So every 28 days, we're going to have a full moon. And then several weeks later, we have a new moon, and the cycle just continues. But in this situation, I think that, like I said, because it's so strongly tied to the Mars retrograde, we may feel like some of these themes just keep coming up. And as a result of the conjunction to Mars, it's really pushing us to go, hey, this hurts, I don't like that. Or, I'm feeling rushed and I'm not quite ready yet. Or it can also positively motivate us to make some changes emotionally and want to kind of leap into action. Now, very specifically, outside of the Cancer degree being associated with 16, when we look at the decans associated with Gemini, because 16 degrees falls under the second decan, it has connections to Venus. So if you follow that, if you're into that in terms of breaking the decans down, in theory, right, Venus being more about harmony, communication, like socializing. So when we blend that energy of Venus with you know, a full moon that's taking place conjunct Mars, we can find that sometimes a little friction or getting like a little hot and bothered can be just what the doctor ordered in order for us to be able to kind of come out with our true feelings and tell people how we feel, what we're passionate about, and it's gonna give us almost like the motivation or the fuel to get to going where we wanna go. So there's positive, constructive ways to use this moon. It's all about your awareness. Now I want you guys to look back to the new moon that we had in Gemini. This was May the 30th, 2022. This is when we had a new moon in Gemini, so we were planting seeds. This is where you want to pull your chart out and find where Gemini is in your natal horoscope. Which house is it in? At the end of May this year, we planted this seed and set new intentions in that area of life. So it's going to be different for each and every one of the 12 signs. This has now come to a full kind of blossoming point with the full moon, and now we are wrapping something up, and there is something that has matured, and now we're going to kind of get the ripe fruit in that area of our life. So I also want you guys to take a look at September 16th through the 23rd of 2022. So just a couple months ago, not too long ago. The reason why I bring this time period up is that this was the last time that Mars was kind of hovering around this 16, 17 degrees of Gemini. Now we know that in a retrograde, a planet will kind of ding that several times over. So we're going to see it hit again, and that will be kind of in the new year. So you might see a further kind of unfolding happening then. But you may be finding that you're coming back, right? Retrograde Mars back to conversations, old intense, you know, feelings, exchanges. And Mars is a little grumpy because it is retrograde. So make note of May 30th and mid-September, like the 16th through the 23rd. There was a continuation or a reviewing of something in that area of your life. Now, what is Gemini? What does Gemini represent? Gemini traditionally is associated with the third house, ruled by Mercury. So Gemini has a sense of like duality, right? We think about the twins. There's two different positions, two different viewpoints, two different ideas, two different ways of doing things. It's very versatile. But Gemini also represents the mind and the ability to kind of contemplate and go back and forth between right brain and left brain. And with this sign, because it's a double-bodied sign, we always see options and the need to communicate or share or be curious and ask questions. And it's very strongly tied to education, as is the sun in Sagittarius. So we look at like Gemini being associated with like the lower mind, you know, learning just how to communicate or read for the very first time, leading us into the 9th house where we apply that knowledge and we go to college or we get a license or a degree or we travel because we've learned to kind of get around in our immediate day-to-day environment. The 3rd house is like your neighborhood. And it's shining a light on all of these planets that have been hanging out in Sagittarius. So this is, I view it as kind of like what I think and versus what I know, right? Sagittarius, I know the bigger kind of picture of things. So whenever we see planets that are falling in this axis of Gemini and Sagittarius, regardless of where it falls in your natal chart, we do see sometimes like lots of debates in regards to education, travel, philosophy, language, anything in regards to our belief system in general. So that's not limited to just religion. It can expand out in terms of like cultural beliefs and scientific beliefs even. But we really see with this emphasis of the conjunction to Mars that there's information that wants to get out quickly, that wants to just like release. So Moon and Mars, you know, it can be kind of agitating. It can definitely bring up some heated conversations. It can bring inflammation. It can bring cutting and severing and fighting and war. But also it gives us the opportunity to just kind of release and send a intention out into the universe and really put our words and our actions side by side and make sure that they're kind of in alignment. Now, when we think of Gemini, like the who category would be relatives, people like your siblings or your cousins, perhaps even like siblings that are are similar ages as you, or some other family members that might be around your similar age. Neighbors as well, because Gemini has connections to our neighborhood. So we can hear more squabbles with neighbors like, oh, there's trash on my lawn, or, you didn't pick up your dog's business on the pavement, or just noticing that there's just like more kind of friction with like a house party that's going on somewhere in the neighborhood and people are complaining. You can see that sense of agitation that can come up in your kind of day-to-day space, because that's what Gemini represents. But in terms of what Gemini represents, it's also going to be things like gadgets, apps, computers, cell phones, social media, vehicles, cars, especially transportation, documents, things like licenses, IDs, paperwork that we have to process, tickets to get on a train or to get on a bus, or a passport that you need, as well as communication. So communication is not limited to just talking to a person one-on-one. It can be emails, text messages, things like that. And Gemini is a sign that is mutable, so it's very changeable. So it has the ability to kind of be flexible, go in multiple directions. We see lots of versatility with Gemini. The thing is that because it is the very first of the mutable signs, yes, it has the ability to be changeable and adaptable, but it also, to me, seems a little scattered. Like the Mars retrograde has felt a little scattered, at least to me. And when we're dealing with the elements of air is always detached and intellectual. So what I love about Gemini is that it has the ability to connect and socialize and then kind of flutter away and go and do its own thing, and then also kind of go back and forth. So we may find that there can be back and forth conversations, long email chains that we're having to go through, really having to kind of pick up that phone call because we're getting a lot more calls or a lot more text messages than usual. And it's going to have us really busy with information exchange or information overload, depending on how you look at it. But in the grand scheme of things, I have a feeling that this is going to be some major action revolving around like social media, local news media, and also just narratives revolving around big media in general. You may see that there's more topics relating to Mars. So we're going to hear about more house fires. We're going to hear about more accidents, more crashes, more road delays, and other things also, if they're, pulling things up in your neighborhood and resurfacing stuff. Or we may hear about, heated exchanges that can be threats of war. Unfortunately, that's kind of what comes with Mars. So we're going to knock on wood and hope that that's not the case, but it would not surprise me if we see something revolving around that. Such because Mars is connected to things that are hot or sharp. So weapons of war, or, more conversations revolving around heated tensions, and the inability to kind of diffuse that, right? Now, like I said, heated situations, but it can also be desire. Desire is a big word that comes with Mars, and, holding ourselves accountable for making change in our lives, and doing that through telling other people what we're passionate about and what we're intending to do, because Mars is about action, right? We don't do anything in our life generally unless Mars is behind it. So we need that energy to be able to kind of accelerate us and push us forward. So we may find that this is like a very climactic point where we're realizing what we truly desire, what we're most passionate about, and what we're going to go after. We want to watch for being defensive though, because Mars is retrograde. So we've got a rather kind of angry Mars, because Mars is usually able to go full steam ahead, right? So I want you guys to think of Mars retrograde as like, you've got the car that's in neutral and you're revving the engine. You're not going anywhere. You're hearing the intensity and the wanting to pull forward, but there's no movement. But still, the engine gets hot. When we put it under the sign of Gemini, it's like wanting to have conversations, biting our tongue. That's been something I've noticed a lot these last few weeks, really ever since Mars started coming into shadow. Just a lot of things. It's like you bite your tongue, and then you bite your tongue, you bite your tongue, and then finally there's just like that switch that flips, and it's like, no, now I'm going to say something. For those of you guys who have been dealing with that situation in your life, this may be that turning point where it's like, okay, I just have to get it out. And we know that when we're holding on to emotions in our bodies, especially negative emotions like anger, fear, resentment, it manifests as illness, or it manifests as rashes or fevers or inflammation in the body in general. So it's important through this transit to be mindful of that and be finding outlets and ways to be able to kind of release that. Like, you know, Mars is a sign that's very sexual. So it may also be that for some of you guys, depending on which house it's going to be taking place in, it can be a very passionate sexual kind of time. And I'll touch on that, especially when you're looking at like Moon Mars conjunctions in synastry, or if you're looking at that in like transits. It can be a time where there's just more action taking place that's really pushing you to really get real and get raw with your emotions. Now, I want to read to you guys the Sabian symbol for Gemini. And in true Gemini fashion, I actually just decided to do this. You guys know when I read the Sabian symbols, generally I will read you the symbol for the next degree, right? Because unless it lands exactly on 16 degrees, we read 17. But I read 16 and I read 17, and I think in my better judgment, I am leaning more in the direction of this applying to 16 degrees. You'll see why. But this is 16 degrees and 1 minute. So we're really splitting hairs here. I will read both of them, and you guys can be the ones who can decide which one you feel like really applies the most. Let me know below. As always, this is my Sabian symbol book, A Screen of Prophecy. If you guys are ever wondering what I'm reading or what I'm using on the channel, what books I recommend to learn astrology, you can always find that in my links below on my Amazon page. I am updating that regularly. For those of you guys who have this book, it is going to be page number 107. Gemini 16, indignation. So the theme is liberty and justice for all. The symbol speaks to the eternal struggle of the disenfranchised to be fully accepted members of society without the accompanying rights and privileges. The image of a woman symbolizes all efforts to discriminate and separatism in whatever they appear. The emphasis here is on the necessity that men need to learn to cooperate or manually give and take when differences arise. The respect and rights to others to form their own opinions and make their own decisions. The symbol also stresses the importance of objectivity, balancing personal rights against the rights of others. At its highest, it represents a strong sense of justice and an unwavering commitment to the preservation of human dignity. Watch for prejudice and self-elevating discrimination. The accent today is on discontent. Things may not seem fair or equal, and you may be feeling left out. Your greatest advantage lies in making sure you have all your facts straight before presenting your case or voicing your complaint. Try to understand the other person's point of view. Guard against being overbearing or pushy. Appeal the reason you would like to renegotiate. If you demand all or nothing, likely you'll get nothing. So Mars Moon, to me this makes sense because definitely there's this sense of the opposition of the full moon being relational, right? And it's like if we're leaning into the lower octave of the moon Mars, where we're irrational and heated and angry and, you know, throwing a fit or giving somebody an ultimatum, then it may not play out in our favor. And a lot of it does deal with finding the balance and making sure that people are getting their rights, you know, given to them, that they are being acknowledged. Okay, so here is Gemini 17. The head of the health dissolved into the head of mentality, development. The theme is maturation. The symbol speaks to the process of maturation or growth from youth, self-involvement to the development of a social conscience. The image of the head dissolved into the head of a mentality suggests spiritual growth, self-awareness, and the ability to see the world through the eyes of others. This degree also implies that physical and mental well-being are the result of well-rounded, very practical grounding in the everyday world. At its highest, it represents self-integration, broad vision, and wisdom. Guard against Peter Pan syndrome or an obsession with youthfulness and the refusal to grow up. The accent is on maturity and expansion of consciousness. It's time to put selfish concerns aside and focus on the welfare of the whole. Your greatest advantage lies in the future, and what you can expect to experience if you continue in your present direction and course of action. Guard against relying on others to take care of your needs, handle your responsibilities, don't get caught unprepared. Adulthood, development, growth, evolution, completeness, wholeness. So when I look at these two together, right, like the 16 and the 17, what really catches my eye for the first 16, liberty and justice for all, right? being able to see those who are cast out of sight in society, or who are feeling like they're not being integrated or not being treated fairly, and the need to find objectivity and like not being pot calling the kettle black, right? So we're seeing this. It's hard for me to like not go into like a total rant right now with some of the stuff that's going on in the world, but we're seeing this across the board, right? We're seeing this with some of the protests that are going on around the world, where there is a tendency to not really open up to negotiation. And in some situations, it is not a good idea to negotiate because rights are not being honored. And then we go to the 17 degrees, where it's talking more about like learning that we have to grow. We have to grow up. There needs to be a sense of not just being so self-consumed, that we have to think about other people. And sometimes growing up means that we have to start integrating newer versions of ourselves, which can be difficult, right? Spiritual growth and awareness, to see the world through the eyes of other people. So I think you're going to see and hear a lot about people who are talking about what's going on in the rest of the world, and whether or not we weigh in on that, or we say something, or we jump in, or we're making statements in general in terms of whether or not we show them our support quickly, right? Because the moon is conjunct Mars. So I made a list of things before I get into the aspects that might be helpful just to kind of marinate on. These are things that just really kind of came up for me that really kind of rang true. And one would be, are we actively listening, or are we just waiting to speak? I have a tendency to do this sometimes. I have to admit, I have noticed that about myself. I have like Mars and Mercury and the Sun in the same sign. So I have a tendency to want to kind of bring myself back and go, don't be waiting to just reply, really listen to what this person is saying. Obviously, like years of being in sessions and like talking to clients, it's really kind of taught me how to do that and how to be more present, and also how to mediate. But in your life, right, when there's something going on, or there is a heated exchange, or there is a need to kind of respond very quickly, are you getting defensive? Are you planning what you're going to be saying? Are you just waiting to speak? Or are you actively listening to the other person? Because part of this integration is hearing what other people have to say. There's no doubt, like when we have a full moon, like, energy is rather high, emotions are running very high, because that's what the lunation is about. But when we have it in this situation conjunct Mars, it can literally be meltdowns, people having meltdowns, and that's how you get that stuff out. And it's important that we're hearing other people, because that can be an amazing way of being able to diffuse some of the miscommunications that can be coming up. Number 2 would be, are we distracted or inconsistent in some way? Certainly, I have noticed this as a part of the theme with the Mars retrograde in my own life, but also with many of my clients. And a lot of this is as a result of just Mars's extended square to Neptune, and not having a lot of clarity about what direction we take. Like, it feels very Two of Swords energy. We're kind of like weighing the options, like, well, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Or, if this happens, or if I go down this path, how do I know I can trust this? Or if I go in this direction, how do I know I can trust that? So we feel very mentally kind of perplexed and stressed. And there's definitely a sense of, I think, where we're getting distracted and not able to make decisions, not able to execute. But this can also be, are we distracted and do we have our phone in our hand all the time? Or are we distracted and, just aimlessly scrolling, or, kind of just skimming over the details and not really like sitting down and like thoroughly going through the email? Are you sitting at a meeting? Are you having lunch with somebody and just kind of like, haphazardly like throwing in, yeah, sure, okay, like, but not really paying attention to the conversation? I think disassociation can be like a real issue during this moon, because this is not a time where you want to be spacing out and disassociating, because you're gonna get your hand slapped. Whether you're in class, or you're in a meeting, or you've got a partner that's saying, hey, this is really important, I need you to hear me. Did you hear what I said? And you're like, what? It'll erupt into an argument. So there is a need to be present and be willing to take action. And that's what I like about the Mars transit. I think that it shows us that you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. You can't just, generally Mars in Gemini has no problem being able to be like, yeah, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. But when it's retrograde, it's saying, don't just talk about it, be about it. So watch for getting distracted or inconsistent. Take note of where you can kind of curb some of those tendencies and those habits so that way you can feel like you're actually getting more work done. This came up for me also, and I started laughing as I put it down because it just sounds like a really bad Western movie. But everybody has seen that. I'm born in Arizona, so I've seen tons of like Westerns. It's like one of my favorite types of movies to watch. I love time period pieces. But we've all seen that situation where like the bad guy walks into the bar and he says something and the sheriff is there and he's like telling him to get out of the bar, and then like the villain says something and then somebody in the bar goes like, "Them's fighting words." That's what this moon is. So this moon is them are fighting words. Obviously terrible in terms of the terminology, but there can be things that can be said during this full moon that are generally okay. Like you can just kind of skate by and it's not really taken out of context, or people aren't as agitated, or they're not going to be as defensive. We need to be mindful of our tone. Like there can be arguments as a result of things that are being texted or emailed that's taken completely out of context, but there can also be people who are a little bit more short-tempered, and what usually wouldn't bother them totally sets them off. So people are going to be on edge, and you want to watch with that Moon-Mars conjunction where people are a little bit more sensitive and more likely to kind of explode as a result of something you say that just rubs them the wrong way. All the more reason to really lean into Mars retrograde, because it's saying, okay, think about that. Think about the repercussions before you say it, right? Think before you say something. Look before you leap. It's going to be hard to, I think it's going to be hard to avoid. I'm not going to tell people not to speak their piece, but not the best day to be like telling somebody like, okay, you know, we need to meet and like hash it out after, you know, going through a separation or a break for a month. Like, you don't want to do that. You know, there can be some real combativeness, and be mindful of just how you're communicating with other people. Also, it's important to be tuning into the mind, right? Because that's what Gemini rules. It's about the mind. It's how we're processing things. And we want to be watching for impulsive decisions. Are we very quickly jumping to conclusions? Are we very quickly pulling the trigger on something and not reading the fine print in the contract, not really looking both ways before we go through the intersection? This is a big thing, impulsive decisions across the board, especially because the moon is saying there's going to be events that are going to get triggered that's going to collectively get everybody riled up, and then you have to decide how you're going to respond. But if there is some global event, or if there is something that happens around this period of time, I think it also means, do we feel like we need to kind of like be a keyboard warrior and get on social media and be posting about it and talking about it? Is it smart to jump to conclusions? Probably not. So I would say cool the jets on that one, relax, go into taking a few minutes to journal, or even doing some breath work. And because it's conjunct Mars, it's so important for us to find an outlet, right? Using this anger or this frustration or this passion from this full moon to be able to figure out what truly lights our fire, like what is it we desire, and use that as fuel to make change in our lives. That is how you guys want to use this, especially because a lot of the outlets to this are either to Chiron or they are to Saturn, which is basically saying stick to your goals, be willing to heal yourself, and really focus on what you're thinking like internally. What can you say to yourself that can kind of pump yourself up, right? With this full moon, it's really important to kind of like be your own hype man and be pushing yourself along and reminding yourself that you're healing and you're continuing to learn along the way, right? Gemini never stops learning. I think with the moon conjunct Mars, it's very likely, especially in the mutable sign. I mean, we have so much mutable energy in the skies at the time of this full moon. I get the impression that there will be a collective need to adapt in some way, right? So whether that's being like, okay, I used to go this way to work, but there's road work, so now I got to kind of find another way. If it means that you have an issue with a vehicle and now you need to find a backup vehicle. If it means that you're experimenting with other social platforms and seeing what else is out there other than what you're used to using, it may be that. I'm anticipating, because Gemini deals both with, like I said, local news or television, or perhaps local schools or social media, we may find that there's like a number of people that are like, I'm out, you know, I'm leaving this platform, or I'm moving to another platform. And there may be some changes also in terms of how we communicate, and it's as a result of new information that is emerging that's making us realize that we either need to scale it back a little bit and not be defensive, or we need to rise to the occasion and really stand up and say something. Obviously, it can be very challenging to do because we have so many mutable squares, and still the focal point by sign is Pisces. So we've got Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. We're filling some squares to Neptune, so there is still some room for us to get kind of fleeced and see what we want to see, or be told something that may not be entirely true. So usually when I see something like this, I'm like, oh man, there's going to be like some, thing that's going to spread like wildfire on Twitter or on Instagram, or there's going to be something in the news that's going to have everybody like up in arms over something, and we're not going to have a lot of clarity, right? I'll leave it at that because I don't want to get too much into global events, but I think you guys kind of get where I'm coming from. And, in general, because this is so oppositional, the sun and the moon always represent that climax between two areas of our life. But the sun is also in opposition to Mars. So we kind of feel like it's a challenging day. It's a day where we may have to defend ourselves in some way, or we may have to feel like we need to be more physically active, or be really using our critical thinking skills with this moon that's going to be in Gemini. Okay, so let's get into the aspects. Let's go through that just so you guys better understand what's going on with this moon. Obviously, the big one is the fact that it's a full moon. So you've got the sun in Sag, the moon in Gemini, and then the opposition. So it's a climax. In many ways, we're coming off of still that new moon that we had in Sagittarius 2 weeks ago. Very positive, right? It had the trines to Jupiter. We had Venus very close by. It's been a much easier kind of lunar cycle than what we had last month with the eclipses. But I think that, it represents the need to also bring two polar things together. So this might represent like that missing piece of information, right, that we didn't have or we didn't know, or something that we need to learn before we can make the Sagittarius area of our life move more so fully in fully function. We also have the opposition between the sun and Mars. To me, that kind of feels like friction. It feels like a challenge. It feels like you're having a heated debate about something that you believe in or something that you thought you knew, and then having to kind of walk something back. I had said this a long time ago before the Mars retrograde happened. I was like, Mars retrograde will literally be about people in the media walking back their statements. And so I have to say, over these last few months, with all of the cancel culture that's gone on across the board with individuals who have had really large audiences in general, it's interesting now to kind of see some of the stuff unfold and people kind of get brought back onto these platforms. So there's some sense of like vindication for some of the people that we thought were the villains. And now we're kind of starting to realize that there is like a trickle effect that's affecting other people that are starting to see the bigger picture and what narrative has been created in the media, and really that there's like a lot more going on than what meets the eye. And that some of these people, some of them, not all of them, have been voices for utilizing their anger and their frustration in a positive way to highlight where there has been, just issues with victims that have been going on. So whether you're looking at stuff going on with the protests in China, or you're looking at all the stuff that's been happening with the scandal with Balenciaga, very squares to Neptune type vibes, stuff that's been hidden in things that we don't necessarily see. And then these people that are courageous enough to step forward and go, this is wrong, and these people are being mistreated. So this will continue. We're going to see the Mars squares happen clearing to March. So this ain't over. This is just representing really like the second phase of, now that we have this information on whatever is going on in the world or in your life, what are you going to do about it? Right? How does this information suddenly show up and change your mind or change your perspective, and then in turn make you want to get involved or say something that's going to really help the collective? I want you guys to think about that. Obviously, one of the better aspects of this is the fact that we also have the full moon that's in a trine to Saturn. So we see stabilization, commitment, security, something that's locking in. We'll get that really until the moon goes, through 22-ish degrees. So really into the evening on December 7th and even into the early hours, December 8th. But when Mars works with Saturn, we've seen this at the end of November, there is more focus and determination and meeting timelines and just seeing everything just kind of come into its form. Now we're going to see that there's an opportunity to kind of let something loose or to launch something or to make a statement. So some of you guys may actually use it for that, to kind of launch an online store or to launch a book or put something out there. Now, this is a full moon in Gemini, so it is ruled by obviously Mercury. Mercury will have just moved into the cardinal earth sign of Capricorn. Now, Mercury's not in shadow yet, so don't worry. You have plenty of time. You can really work with this until it hits about 8 degrees. But I like the fact that Mercury is hanging out in a Saturn-based sign. I think that having Mercury in this placement really allots for commitment, maturity, reliability, timing, scheduling, structure, anything in regards to Capricorn. So this is like government, this can be business, this can be scheduling, all of that stuff, because it's very strongly tied to Saturn. Now, we have some aspects that's going on, obviously, from Mercury. Now that Mercury has moved into Capricorn, it is an out of sign, but it's about 2 degrees. Mercury is in a square to Jupiter, okay? So very soon Jupiter is going to come back later this month into Aries. But anytime we see squares to Jupiter, it enhances the planet that's making the square. So once again, global, big, emotional, hidden news, information, because Jupiter is in a water sign. So it's connected to Pisces, the 12th house, stuff that we've had a feeling about, that we've dreamed about, that we haven't seen so clearly, and then boom, full moon, square Jupiter. That tells me that there can be some really significant statements that people who are, head of state or office may be making in terms of what's going on with global events and, their 2 cents on anything from religion to travel to legal stuff. You're going to hear a lot of people debating legality anyway with so many planets in Sag, but it's beyond that, right? That's kind of also tied to Libra. I think of Sag as like everybody's, rights that we are born with. Like it doesn't matter what country you're in. It doesn't matter what your background is or your gender. Everybody has certain rights that need to be abided by from birth. And so I think Sagittarius is going to be really highlighting with some of the squares where we need to shine a light on this, and we can't just like let some of this stuff skate by. I think it's also going to be more footage and videos and just information that's coming from a variation of different news outlets from all over the world that's finally starting to get through to the masses. And we're starting to see about these people who have been isolated or locked up, or people who have been hidden, or people who have had to, flee to other countries. And we're going to start hearing more about the effects of that as a result of this full moon. Now, both the sun and the moon, because they're in mutable signs at 16 degrees, are in a square to Neptune and Pisces. And this is where things get a little iffy, because we'll see the moon move through the square for about 2 days. The sun is building into the square. And it can play out a number of different ways. I think that with Mars and the moon square Neptune, blind spots, not seeing everything, reacting to something that could be gossip, or it could be fake, or the perspective could be twisted in some way. And then also watching the sun coming into a square with Neptune. On one hand, it can be inspirational, compassionate, very sensitive, very spiritual when it's in the sign of Sagittarius and Pisces. But I have a feeling this is more about being like, well, yeah, but what can I do? I've heard a lot of people be like, well, that's just, the way that it is. That's just how that country is, or that's just how that religion is, or that's just how life is. And I have found every single time I hear that, me personally, I get agitated, because I'm like, how can people not care, right? Like, how can you not care? So in some ways, the squares to Neptune can represent our avoidance and the inability to feel like we can get involved, or that we may not feel like we can make a difference. And that kind of leans into the Pisces area, where you can either get involved and everything becomes one, or it kind of washes away. So there may be this either literal, it might be a literal debate that we're having over these next few weeks about what is right and what is wrong, and where can we intervene, and do we know enough, and are we just going off of assumptions? Kind of messy with these mutable squares because there's not a lot of clarity. So we also need to be careful for the telephone game and telling somebody something and then it gets distorted. By the time it comes back, it's a completely different story. But it can happen also with photos or with images. It can happen with simple conversations that get totally blown out of proportion, and then all of a sudden there's like an argument. We've also got the, like I said, the moon Mars in a trine to Saturn. The sun is in a sextile to Saturn. So Saturn seems to be like, personally, probably one of the better placements in the midst of this full moon. I remember telling you guys in my last video, Saturn is your anchor right now. You need to be looking at where Saturn is in your chart, knowing that everything is funneling into Saturn, and helping you really kind of continue the momentum forward with really securing and crystallizing something, committing to something very significant in your life. Saturn's finally working its way out of the squares between Uranus and also the nodes. So we're going to feel that ease up before Saturn starts moving up in degrees until the beginning of the new year. I also like the fact that, you know, Venus is in a square. Venus is sitting at 27 degrees, the galactic center point, a big old black hole out there in the cosmos, which can be profound. Like that 27 degrees is our connection to everyone and everything. So if you believe in that stuff, if you believe that that's where we tune in and we express the universe's energy, and it can be really intense. It can be anger, frustration, passion, desire. But Venus is obviously it's a sweet planet. So it wants everybody to tune in and harmonize into the frequency of love and freedom when it's in the sign of Sagittarius. Its dispositor, Jupiter, is in the square. So Venus square Jupiter makes me feel like it can be where relationship situations are blown out of proportion, financial situations are blown out of proportion, but also there can be like a real sweet tooth. Especially those of you guys who have a taste for like specific cuisines. So if you're like really craving, oh, I really want that thing and I have to get it from this city that I visited, and then you're like trying to figure out how to like ship it to you, you know? We might be craving things that might be out of our reach. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting with that. And that can also be travel, that can be people, right? That can be financial goals. It doesn't have to be limited purely to just food. But that's important because Venus is the ruler of the North Node. So there is like this feeling of the days to follow, right? The moon will come into an opposition with Venus, feeling like something's out of reach. Venus continues to come into a square with Jupiter, and it's in the last degrees of the mutable sign. So Jupiter will move soon. Venus will move soon. They're going to go into cardinal signs, which means something is also wrapping up, something is ending within those two placements as well. Watch for overspending, overdoing it. I think like Moon Mars can be like, oh, I'm just gonna go to the car lot and look at a car, and then you get there and there's like this pushy salesman and you see the Corvette and it's in red and you sit in it and you drive it around, and the next thing you know you're signing paperwork and driving it off the lot, and then you realize how much the tags are going to be, the insurance is going to be, how much your car payment is going to be, but you rushed into it, right? Obviously, very generic kind of example, but these are the kinds of things sometimes when we see those conjunctions. Those are the biggest aspects that I've got for you guys. Like I said, I like the fact that the ruler is at least in Capricorn, so it's a little bit more sane, a little bit more stable. And it's also still referencing the fact that Saturn is in charge here. So with these air trines, you'll see on the 7th and the 8th, when in doubt, communicate, right? And what I've learned about the opposition between Gemini and Sag is you don't have to have the same beliefs. You don't have to speak the same language. You don't have to agree. But we do have to have an exchange that is equal, where both parties are getting a chance to communicate and say something. We also need to be practicing our listening skills and being mindful of where we have a tendency to be defensive. And we can really find that we have a lot more in common than we think, as long as we're willing to kind of open up. Now, some rituals that you guys can do during this particular full moon, probably the thing I would recommend everybody doing, super simple. Gemini is writing or communicating, right? And Mars is fire, and it's a full moon. So if you're agitated, you're frustrated, you're wanting an outlet, or you want to find a way to be able to just blast all of that negativity away, write everything down. Obviously, be safe, be smart, like do this in a way where you can throw it into a fireproof pot, or you're doing it over a campfire, you're doing it where you have even in a fireplace. Write everything down. You can do it in red pen, okay, like red Sharpie. Write everything down that you're just wanting to release and throw it into the fire. Super easy, really great way to be able to kind of neutralize some of that and also diffuse some of the potential frustration and arguments that can kind of come up. You can also just journal in general. So you might find that you're more likely to be writing and putting something together and putting all your ideas down or problem solving in some way. But also because Gemini rules like moving around in a car, you can go for a drive. Obviously, everybody be very mindful when you're driving during this transit, because you're going to see more accidents more than usual during that like 72-hour period. I'm also anticipating that this is going to be people who are in a need, or they're demanding a document, or they're demanding that they need to be able to like physically pick up and go somewhere. So if you're trying to catch a plane last minute, if you're trying to rent a car last minute, if you're trying to pick up and move last minute, there's going to be a sense of needing to act quickly. But you may find that some of these things are out of reach and you're having to kind of fight for it. So, hop on a bike, get on a stationary bike, go for a walk, find a punching bag, go to a kickboxing class. These are awesome ways that you can also diffuse some of this energy where you're using your hands, Gemini, and hopefully not punching out your family members, because I could definitely see that happening. Work with the element of air and fire though, and they fuel each other. So you can use incense as well, or candles. Now, those of you guys who want to know who's going to feel this the most, that will be 14 to 18 degrees of the mutable signs. Obviously, if you have 14 to 18 degrees of Gemini, sun, moon, or rising, or a personal planet, very, very important, because this will be very impactful, especially if it is your moon or your Mars, okay? Because that's a very important Mars return, or it's a very important lunar return. And it's part of the Mars retrograde cycle, so it really should be taken a look at. But also the other mutable signs, right? So whether you're Virgo or you're Sag or you're Pisces, you're going to be feeling this as well, because it's going to create a square, or in the case of Sagittarius, it will be an opposition, which can represent pressure and the need to act. Mars squares do not feel good. I'm going to be honest with you. There can definitely be some conflict and the need to kind of change something. 14 to 18 degrees of the air signs. So if you are Aquarius or Libra, you will be experiencing a trine. So it's going to be easier for you too, because you guys are sister signs to Gemini. You'll be receiving those trines, which means there's going to be free flowing information of some kind, which is going to allow you to kind of proceed forward with some kind of action. And 14 to 18 degrees of the fire signs of Leo and Aries, you'll be experiencing a sextile. And air and fire fuel each other. So it'll be beneficial. It'll be helpful for you. If you're an earth sign, this will be more so about talking about making physical changes. So it doesn't necessarily mean physical change happens, but there's some information and some back and forth. There's some planning that needs to go on for there to be a physical change. And if you're a water sign, this is going to be more emotional. It's going to feel more like clearing, talking about your feelings, writing a letter to somebody in some sense, or just finally having a purge where you just kind of let it all out. So you might be a little bit more in your feelings than most people, okay? All right, so let me take you guys through the 12 rising signs, and I will be talking about where this full moon is taking place, what you want to be aware of, and then I will also pull a card for you and see what the tarot says in terms of the predictions. Okay, so we are going to start first with Aries and Aries rising. Hopefully you're doing well, Aries. Okay, so here's the deal. You have got a full moon in Gemini. It's taking place in your natal third house. Now, this is important, okay, because it is obviously involving Mars, your chart ruler. So when you see these two come together, it's quite important, because it says that there's some kind of action, some kind of conversation, some kind of vehicle thing or movement thing that's going to be taking place. Now, Mars obviously rules your first house of the self and the body. And it's in the third house of communication or vehicles, travel, learning something. It can also be about a short distance trip or a relative possibly. And Mars also rules the 8th house of others' resources or psychological triggers. So I have a feeling that something about this full moon that's taking place for you, Aries, is basically saying it's time to kind of like initiate a conversation, wrap something up, sign a document, talk about moving, buying a car, something of that nature. Now, it's interesting that the ruler is actually in the 10th house. So it might mean that you have to talk to a sibling or a relative about a family member. It may also mean that you have to initiate a conversation or a meeting where you renegotiate salary, perhaps. Some of you guys may be finding out you're moving or you're planning on moving as a result of this full moon. But like I said, it's very, very active for you. So you're going to feel this, as well as Gemini and Scorpio. You guys are the ones that are going to feel this the most. I like the fact that Saturn and the moon are in a trine. And it tells me that there is some sense of being like, okay, we're focusing on our goals. If you have to move, if you have to make a change with the vehicle, it looks like you might have some support or some help from a friend. But this can also be a time where you're launching a website, launching a blog, you're getting ready to start selling something new or learning something new. If you're looking to like learn a language, that's possible as well. But the third house is pretty active for you. So let's take a look and see what the cards have to say. Hello, Ace of Swords. How appropriate is that? It's like taking swift action, having the conversation, and doing it now. This is very similar to the energy of the first house, right? So the fact that you have your first house Lord, Mars, in the third is, let's sit down, let's sign the contract, let's initiate the conversation. This can also be about ideas and information and something that's personal to you and you wanting to share that with another person. I do feel like the Ace of Swords is a really positive omen because it is saying there's something new that's starting. So some of you guys might start a new course, you might start writing a book, you might learn how to drive, but this can also be a combative card. So be mindful that swords are being used to direct energy or draw a line in the sand. Be mindful of your words, Aries, okay? Good luck. For Taurus and Taurus rising, you have a full moon in Gemini that is going to be taking place in your natal second house. Okay, so this is your money house, Taurus. It's all about your spending power, your resources, and you have the full moon that is in conjunction to Mars. So here we have Mars, the ruler of your 12th house, of what's hidden and not seen, private or subconscious, as well as your 7th house of relationships and partners. So the area of your life, the full moon's taking place in your money house, which means you could suddenly realize, okay, I need to buy something quickly, or there's an unexpected expense and you need to buy it quick. Or it could mean that you're in a situation where you have to pay somebody something very suddenly. You get an envelope in the mail and it says, hey, you owe more money on your insurance, or, something was overdrafted, or maybe you're negotiating with someone. That's the other way I could see this, Taurus. There's like a little bit of a back and forth of a negotiation going on, and the need to kind of move very quickly, especially because it seems like you want to feel like you have the upper hand or that you're in charge in some way. And I say this because Mars is in a trine to Saturn, right? So this can be a time where you're having to kind of negotiate, but you're like, okay, this is the timeline, get this back to me by X amount of days. And there's a bit of a back and forth. So there can be like a really quick exchange or sale or financial situation that kind of happens. Intuitively, I feel like because also it's your 7th house, it can be other people that are making demands. So clients making demands, it can be, partners making demands and being like, hey, I need this now. Can we buy this? Or this is a great opportunity. Let's jump in and invest right now. Granted, the 2nd house is the money that you possess. So with that, speed or the ability to respond can also mean that you charge extra, prices, or you raise your prices, or there's a premium price for giving somebody a service because they need to talk to you right away. But regardless, watch for financial exchanges. You got a lot of planets still hanging out in your 8th house, and I kind of feel like you need to really reevaluate before you're buying or selling anything, and not be feeling like you're being rushed or pushed into anything, because likely there can be something that you don't see coming. And you may be feeling a little bit more defensive when it comes to your self-esteem with Moon and Mars in your 2nd house, really feeling like you need to defend yourself. And it can kind of take people back a little bit, because you're like, no, you're not going to lowball me. I know my worth. This is what it's going to cost, or this is what it's going to take in order to kind of get me to move, right? So let's see what the cards say for you, Taurus. I get the 4 of Coins. Interesting, because, I mean, this is usually a card that's about holding on to something, saving something, holding off, playing hardball, refusing to release something, right? When this card comes up, I always remind my clients, like, you know, energy is, money is an energy. If we're holding onto it too tightly, it does not flow. And if we're kind of spending it and we're just kind of, you know, letting it all out there, we can't hold on to anything either. So we need to find like that middle ground, and we need to practice moderation when it comes to our resources. So significant when you have planets in your 2nd house that says spend, and then you've got planets in your 8th house that says save. And you're going to have to kind of pick and choose your battles and decide what's worth spending and where you actually can be curbing. I think that Mars going retrograde, a lot of Taurus and Taurus risings have been realizing that they don't need as much, they can't spend as much, that they've already kind of cut back, or they've lost one form of income, and they're not really able to do that again, especially if you've been reliant on a partner. So it can be a sense of where you decide to cut someone or something off, or you decide, you know what, I'm not going to give in to the impulse of buying something, I'm going to hold back. Good luck, Taurus. For Gemini, Gemini rising, obviously this is important because this is your full moon. You want to look back to May of this year, where you were setting personal intentions for yourself, for your body, for your appearance, for how you communicate and how you are out in the world. This is a full moon that's going to be in your 1st house. So you will be feeling a completion on a personal level. Some of you guys, it can mean that you're like, okay, this is the new and improved version of me. Some of you guys are kind of flexing and showing new muscles, new vocabulary, new intentions, new direction. And it's really important that you're getting out there and having an outlet for all this energy in your body. Now, Mars, right? Mars rules your 11th house of friends and goals. It also rules your 6th house, which deals with health and wellness. So it might feel like some of you guys are finally starting to realize what your goals have been, and now where they're peaking, like you're finally hitting your fitness goals or your mental health goals, or where you're still needing to make some tweaks and integrate some stuff. You want to watch for like rushing around, because you can be more accident prone with Mars and the moon on your ascendant. And you also want to watch for having squabbles or having like conflict potentially with other people, because you're just really aggressive and forward thinking in terms of where your life is going right now. Some of you guys are more prone to not just accidents, but cutting yourself, burning yourself, and not seeing everything so clearly. I would advise you with the trines to Saturn to really focus when you're feeling frazzled in finding routine, talking to a mentor, talking to a therapist, somebody who can kind of ground that energy out and be like, and why are you angry? And what can you change? And like help you kind of really work through that, so you're not feeling super scattered, right? For some situations, a full moon on the ascendant is also going to be something in regards to your body. So for some people, it can mean that you're dealing with an illness. For some people, it can be that you're just very mentally frazzled, especially with the squares to planets in Pisces. In some certain situations, it can also be indicating that somebody is pregnant or they're getting ready to give birth. Sometimes that can happen because the moon is very lunar. I feel like Mars retrograde for you guys is really having you rethink just what steps and actions you take, and where it's actually beneficial for you not to be super hyper all over the place or reactionary or angry, and really think things through before you react. Obviously, this is highlighting the axis between you and other people, and you got a ton of planets going through your house of relationships. So the theme of partners, clients, romantic partners, business partners is very real, and it's going to highlight, you versus others. And then the square to these planets in Pisces is like okay, I know that people are showing up and I know that I've got work stuff going on, but like, what about me? So you may feel like everybody's kind of waiting on you to make a decision or call the shots or leap into action, and that you need to actually actively participate in this. But still, you know, be mindful of your surroundings, slow down, watch for inflammation. Hot drinks, hot herbs can be really helpful. I think of like ginger, turmeric, stuff like that. If you are feeling like you're having migraines or headaches or having like indigestional issues, okay? Let's see what the cards say for you, Gemini. All right, I got Ace of Coins, which is generally a card that's about money and abundance or fertility or new physical opportunities, investments, making money. But I think that what's interesting, you know, the moon rules your second house of resources, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's not about money, but I think it's about feeling solid. I think it's about you being like, this is what I need to feel safe and secure. This is what I'm going after, and getting really grounded. Can there be better health from this? Yes. Can there be new financial opportunities? Yes. But I think that it's really kind of saying you have to feel secure and solid in what you're initiating before you're bringing in other people, before you're making big changes also in regards to your career. And when you're firm and really locked into your goals, it's only then you know how to proceed forward. But your values are changing, no doubt. And I think that this can also represent that you're suddenly making an investment. You'll see more of this as we get into Capricorn season, when Capricorn gets into your 8th house, and then we're going to have a Mercury retrograde here. And then there can be a sense of like also like getting paid back for something, or finding that you're actually, you know, getting some money in return for an investment. So you'll see money kind of come back to you, or you'll see it grow. Okay. Good luck, Gemini. Now we've got Cancer and Cancer rising. We have a full moon in Gemini taking place in your natal 12th house. Oh boy, this can feel almost like you're like, I just want to hide under the covers, or I want to hide under a rock, okay? So it can be a little intense for you, Cancer. Obviously, Mars rules your 10th house of career, okay? So bosses and work and getting things done, and your, you know, your public reputation. It also rules your 5th house of creativity and children and lovers and projects. Now you're having an extended Mars return here. So many of you guys are like, I'm going away for a month, staying in another country. Many of you guys are like, I'm really working on my mental health and I'm trying to disconnect and like be in nature. But a lot of you guys are thinking about how you can be doing more creative work behind the scenes, and whether that's long hours into the evening, or working after your current job, or setting up shop somewhere, learning something. This is highlighting whatever has been going on with that Mars retrograde for you. Obviously, you're ruled by the moon, right? So when you have a new moon or a full moon, you're going to feel it more. It's going to be more impactful, especially the full moons. And this is 12th house to your ascendant if you're a Cancer rising. So it feels a little intense for the 12th house, right? I feel like you guys may have some issues with your rest and sleeping. I feel like some of you guys may be a little anxious because you're like, okay, I got to get this thing going. I got to find a job, or I got to start a job, or, you know, I'm having some kind of conflict with somebody on the job. That can happen as well. You've got planets that are in your 6th house of daily routine and coworkers, and you've got Mars and the moon that's in the 12th house. I feel inclined to tell you that mind and body health both need to be monitored right now. The mind is very Gemini, but as is the 12th house, and it's kind of saying that if you're burning the candle on both ends, it can have an effect on your physical health. But the 12th house is also hidden spaces, healing centers, mental institutions, prisons, hospitals. So in some certain situations, those who are struggling with mental health issues really benefit by finding someone to talk to and being like, look, I'm really burnt out. I can't come to work. I just need to take some time. I need to talk to someone, especially because you guys can get really, really, really sensitive when the moon comes into conjunction with Mars. It can be private and behind the scenes. I also feel like this can give you the opportunity to just catch up on rest or sleep. Some may, not everybody, but some may also be feeling a little bit under the weather. And if you do have rashes or fevers, they should be taken seriously, especially because they can develop into something that can be more respiratory because it's Gemini. If you've been already healing and working through something and you're still in the process of getting better, you may start to see some positive effects of that, but still don't be too active. You guys still need a lot of rest in this area of your chart. Now, the moon and the Mars in trine to Saturn also tells me that there's just like an emotional release. So I think of like hot baths would be really good for you. Anything that's going to open up your lungs, like aromatherapy or working with eucalyptus or anything that's just going to open stuff up. Mint can be good as well. So you can really like have your process and purge all of those emotions and kind of clear it out, especially if you're processing grief from a relationship or from a loss of some kind. It can help you, especially if you're having a difficult time sleeping. Full moons in general, we can feel that, but even more so with this full moon for you, Cancer. I know it's emotional. I know that, to me, it seems like there are certain patterns and habits that are dying off. And there's also older versions of you in terms of, your profession that's changing and you're ready to just like let it all go. Be very careful with people at work, and not everybody, unfortunately, there is your friend. And you can find, because Mars is not necessarily a positive sign, there can either be like people at work or coworkers, or it can be like romantic partners that don't necessarily have your best interest at heart, or they're making you feel like a little isolated and separated, and they're not communicating with you very well, and you're kind of getting in your head. When in doubt, take care of yourself, put yourself first. Okay, this is very important with this full moon. Let's see what the cards say for you, Cancer. Two of Coins. I see this as like, I know I should be doing this thing. Like I know I should be resting, or I know I should be meditating, or I know I should be, focusing on my health, but I need to be doing that. Like you're distracted. Like there's a imbalance that's going on here. And that's very 6th house, 12th house. Like these are houses where, on the turn of a dime, you suddenly find out that, a job changes, or that, work is going to be ending, or that you are going to have to deal with like a health related situation and you have to move very quickly. You don't want the transits to use your health, mental or physical, to get your attention, right? Especially if you're like fed up at a job, or you're having an issue with a superior or a manager or a parent even, because Mars rules your 10th house. And it can represent the need to kind of really slow down and not be totally overfilling your plate and trying to kind of balance everything. So weigh your options, put your health first. That's what's going to be most important right now, okay? Good luck. For Leo and Leo rising, you have got a full moon in Gemini that will be taking place in your natal 11th house. So Mars and the moon will be in conjunction in the 11th house. Partying, socializing, having a good time. That's really what it's looking like. Obviously, you benefit because you're going to be having a sextile to your ascendant or your sun or your moon. In your chart, Mars rules the 9th house of legality, travel, philosophy, education, as well as the 4th house of home and family. So some of you guys might be finding that there's just a sense of reconnecting with friends from the past. That's been a theme with Mars retrograde. Possibly having extended opportunities to travel and go places with friends. There can, because of the Moon-Mars conjunction, be a bit of a squabble with a friend though. That is possible, especially because you are seeing the squares to Neptune, where there's like a lot of like, wait, you didn't understand that correctly, or like, I didn't mean it that way. You also want to watch out for being on the socials where there can be some tension and some people who are kind of taking things out of context. That can definitely be happening on, your Facebook, Instagram, whatever. But for the most part, because it sextiles your sign, and also because we're seeing it trine Saturn in your 7th, it can be harmonious. It can be a period where there's lots of socializing and wanting to see friends and reconnecting to friends and having them meet your partner or vice versa. It can be that friends are setting you up in some way with someone. Obviously, socializing and romance and dating is kind of a theme here. So there's like a real focus on what makes you happy, the love you give yourself, having a good time, and then joining with other people. So really positive for some of the holiday parties and things that are taking place, especially if you're doing something a little bit sooner. I'm also digging the fact that like Saturn in your 7th is basically saying it's trying to bring only good, solid relationships to you. So it may be a period of time where you're reevaluating, who are the people who are in my corner? Who do I want to spend the most time with? Who is going to bring me the most happiness, right? I would just say that the fact that it's going to be in such strong angles to Neptune in the 8th, alcohol or substances can definitely be the root of some miscommunications with others, and it can be on your end or somebody else's end. And there can also be some like misconstrued action. So sometimes Moon Mars in the 11th is there's like a friend who's always been a friend, but like they kind of come on to you, or like there's something that's kind of like more sexual, and you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. So just be mindful of like parties and socializing and substances, because people can kind of lose their inhibitions and they can be a little bit more forward, and they can feel a little weird, and they can feel like you're kind of getting defensive with another person, okay? Let's take a look at what the cards have to say here. The Death card. Well, it is square Neptune in your 8th house. So certainly there can be a sense of realizing in some certain situations, like who you may actually really have to kind of cut ties with, or what goals are worth pursuing and which ones you kind of have to leave dead in the water. The Death card can be a difficult card, but you know, it's associated with Mars, and it's also associated with Pluto. So the fact that Moon and Mars is coming together makes me feel like there's like this intuitive knowing that if you have that friend that's just like always a lot, and there's drama or there's conflict or they're obnoxious, and then you see it happen and you're like, that's the last straw. I can't really engage with this person anymore. It's time to kind of cut them loose because of X, Y, and Z. You'll know. There may be an ending or a fallout that may be definitive, as much as I hate to say it, but death is definitive. So when that card comes up, it's like, okay, we have to accept this and move on. So in certain circumstances, some arguments, there may be no coming back from, right? But regardless, stick to your goals, because I think the full moon in the 11th house is positive, and it's reminding you that any weeding out or cutting people off is purely just to kind of help you have a really solid crew around you, and you're going to have support from other friends or a partner in the process, okay? Good luck, Leo. For Virgo and Virgo rising, you have got a full moon in Gemini taking place in your natal 10th house. Career, work, responsibility. Gemini, are some of you guys going to be like, that's it, I quit, and like Jerry Maguire your way out of work? What's happening? I guess we'll have to see. I guess I could say for some of you guys, the Mars retrograde, and I've seen this for some of my clients, it has manifested as layoffs in some companies. Whether you're affected by that or not, that's neither here nor there. I'll get to that. But, you know, Mars is cutting, right? And it's retrograde. So it can be that you're like, I'm cutting one job and I'm going to another job, or I'm finally returning back to work. Or it can be that you find out that you got hired for a position. It doesn't have to be negative. Mars rules the 8th house of joint resources and other people's money. And Mars also rules the 3rd house of communication, travel, and contracts. Not a time to be showing up late to work. Not a time to be calling in sick to work. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now, because there can be, as a result of delays and not properly communicating or calling in or letting them know that you're going to be late, it can literally cut off money from another person. Equally, write-ups can happen in offices, or there can be just some really serious, stern conversations that you have with superiors at work. So you've been forewarned. People are combative in general when there's a full moon conjunct Mars, but in the 10th house, it feels very competitive at work. It feels like people are angry or they're frustrated, but there can also be people who are getting kind of turned loose and cut loose. Now, obviously, this is putting some pressure on you. This is particularly uncomfortable for a Virgo rising chart because you have the full moon in your 10th. It's obviously in a square to your relationship sector, so it feels like relationships are questionable, whether you don't know if you're connecting well with someone, or your partner's saying they need more of you, or you're like, if I keep working like this, I'm never going to have time for a personal life. And it's also in opposition to all of these planets that are in Sagittarius in your 4th house. So Virgo rising, especially if you have other personal planets in Virgo, you're experiencing a grand mutable cross. The positive of this is it makes the wheel of the chart turn. So if you've been meaning to quit for some time, if you've been meaning to go back to work, if you've been meaning to get rehired or re-brought on or reinstated in some way, it's almost like this is going to be like your battle cry and being like, I'm coming back, you know, or it could be, I'm out, who's coming with me? I think that negotiations are possible here, especially for like raises and like contract work and being able to negotiate the possibility of being able to bring in more. It's very positive, especially since Jupiter is getting ready to go into your 8th house. So I think that that's, I'm not going to say likely, but it's definitely doable. It's just a matter of like being able to navigate whatever is changing at work right now. If you are somebody who's like a gig worker or you've been working 2 jobs, this can be the turning point where you're like, you know what, I don't have time to do both of these things. I need to pick a lane and stick to it. And you may find that you're finally deciding which one you're going to kind of stick with. Keep in mind the oppositions to your 4th house is bringing out all of this emotional stuff and stuff in regards to your home and your family and your feelings. So if you've been all work and no play at home, or not dealing with emotions, or not focusing on relationships, this can definitely be a point where you can kind of feel like a pop in general. I feel, aside from obviously the Gemini and the Mars ruled signs, this is going to be very, 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 very active for a Gemini rising chart. So let me know below. I want to hear what happens for some of you guys. Does somebody quit? Do you become the boss? Like, what happens? Let's take a look. 3 of Wands. So it's not just about figuring out where you're going to go. It's being like, no, I'm going, and I'm positive and optimistic about what I'm taking on. So this doesn't necessarily make me feel like you're walking away from a position, but it makes me feel like you're open to what the future has in store. Somebody may say to you, hey, we have a new department opening up, or we have a new position opening up, or somebody's leaving. Would you be interested? And you're like, yeah, actually, I'd be interested. Like, let's actually go and suss that out. You may have to start something quickly. Somebody might hire you and say, how does Monday sound? You know, and you're like, what? And it also means that there may be some kind of like journey associated with what you're doing. And it can be training. It can be having to go physically somewhere, learning a new software, or adapting to something to be able to do the job in some way. But 3 of Wands is a positive card. So you're well on your way to wherever it is that you're going, Virgo. Good luck. We've got Libra and Libra rising. You have a full moon in Gemini taking place in your natal 9th house. Now you and Aquarius will benefit from this because you're going to experience a trine. So whether you're a Libra sun, moon, or rising, especially if you have any planets between 14 and 18 degrees of Libra, you're going to feel this the most. You're going to experience a grand air trine Libra. So really use it. It's all about communication, okay? Now, the 9th house is about education, philosophy, foreign travel. It's like airports, it's legal stuff. I don't recommend, though, during this particular full moon to initiate a lawsuit or anything legal. I want to say that. I don't recommend that. I do think that it's important that if you have something pending, if you have a class pending, if you have publishing a book pending, if you have a legal thing pending, like this can be where it moves forward and you proceed to the next step, or you complete that, because that's what full moons are. This can also be about teaching, training, traveling. It can be about advertising and sales. So there may be a sense of you having the opportunity to kind of finally complete that. Now, Mars for you rules your 7th house of partnerships and other people. So your clients, your business partners, your marketplace, husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends. And Mars also rules your 2nd house of money and resources. So it tells me that it's almost like you might have to be the mediator in some situation when it comes to another person. So whether this is a back and forth you're having with a partner about money and resources, or this is you having a conversation and being the mediator and saying to somebody, what's most important to you? You know, where do you feel like you're going to get the most? How can you make the most out of this investment? And you're going to kind of be like the middleman of sorts. There's definitely lots of potential friction you can see also when it comes to traveling, or when it comes to communication in general, because you do have these oppositions in your 3rd and your 9th house. So similar to Aries, they're going to see some heated exchanges about what you know versus what you believe, and it does factor into conversations with other people. So in some certain situations, it's important to agree to disagree, Libra. That can be the best way to handle it. You may find that somebody else is preaching to you or telling you what you should do or how you should behave or what you should be believing in. And your chart ruler, Venus, is hanging out in Sagittarius. So likely you're not going to hold back when it comes to communication and speaking, you know, what it is that you have to say. So just be mindful of that. I like the trines to Saturn. I feel like it's basically saying the bigger picture is being able to do something that comes naturally, do something that feels fun. It might be that you start taking a course or a lesson on something that's going to enhance your creativity. It may also mean that you're starting to think about planning some kind of travel. Now, if you're planning on traveling during this full moon, you find yourself at a bus station or at an airport or a ferry or whatever, scheduling issues do look like a thing because you are going to see oppositions to the 3rd and squares to the 6th. So whether there is delays or there's weather issues or there's visibility issues or there's things that go missing and then you have to go back and then you miss a train, these things can definitely happen. But for the most part, a full moon in your 9th house and a trine to your sign and also a amazing air trine that you're going to be experiencing, you're thinking about what the bigger purpose of life is, what's going to make you happy and how you can be able to focus on happiness and using that as the motivation to get to where it is that you want to go. And if you've been meaning to plan a trip in general, I advise you to do this sooner rather than later. Because to me, it seems like once you get into the Mercury retrograde, there could be some hangups at home and scheduling issues between traveling and home responsibilities. So maybe you'll do that right around the time of the full moon. Obviously, just double and triple check everything, okay? Let's see what the cards have to say for you, Libra. Two of Swords. It's kind of like, do I stay or do I go? Very Mars and Gemini energy. To me, this feels like you're feeling a little perplexed with making a decision and you don't know what to say or you don't know what to choose and you may need to sit on it for a little bit. But know that I think Mars in a trine to Saturn and also your personal placements in Libra is like, when in doubt, take a step back, breathe, and what answer comes to you first, right? Don't overanalyze, don't overthink it. Don't worry about the outcome, which is the one that's going to make the most sense and which is the one that's going to make you the most happy. You may feel like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're kind of up between a rock and a hard place where you want both sides of a situation, but you know that you have to pick one. And I would say don't get stuck here for too long, because if you wait too long to have a conversation or make a decision, you can end up feeling like you lost an opportunity, right? Windows of opportunity can close with this card. Good luck, Libra. We have got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. Hopefully you're doing well. Obviously, Scorpio, this is important as it is for Aries and Gemini because Mars rules your sign. So especially my Scorpio risings, this is one you really want to pay attention to. So we've got a full moon in Gemini taking place in your 8th house of other people's money and resources. So this tells me that you're thinking more on joint resources, taxes, inheritances, insurance, things of that nature. Moon conjunct Mars here. I mean, you are one of the signs that definitely can have a much sexier time. Okay, I guess that's the good news. Mars is comfortable in the 8th house. Even though it's retrograde, it definitely does suggest that there's more opportunity for intimacy and spending time kind of between the sheets with another person. But I think that the conjunction to Mars is also bringing up the fact that you're really passionate in connecting with somebody, not just physically, but intellectually, and like talking about where your lives can go or where your financial future can go or where you may be traveling to or where you may be moving to. And that this is a really big piece of the Mars retrograde, because as your chart ruler goes retrograde in the 8th, you're learning to change the way that you interact with other people. There has been a bit of a back and forth with others' resources, so you may feel like other people have not been as generous, or it's been harder to negotiate deals, or harder to pay off loans or debt, and that's been extended in some way. Now, Mars rules your 1st house of the body, and it also rules your 6th house of health. So Scorpio and Scorpio risings, those of you guys who have pending health-related issues, especially to like your hands or your arms, or if you're having digestional issues, if you're having like issues with your bowels, pay attention. Like you might eat something and then all of a sudden everything goes right through you in this 8th house, unfortunately. It can equally mean that there is sudden and unexpected need to either have somebody pay something off, or needing some kind of surgical or laser type procedure. I don't like saying that, but I'm just letting you know. Where did I get that from? Mars rules your body. Mars rules your 6th house of health. So for Mars to go into the 8th house conjunct the moon is like, oh my God, I cut myself. I need to get sutures, you know, or, oh my God, I burned my arm. I need to go to the ER and I need to have it like treated and wrapped. These things are very, very, very significant, Scorpio. So be very careful. Know that this is also about documents and things pertaining to insurance. So whether it's health insurance, car insurance, inheritances, wills, stuff like that comes up during this time. And some important document probably pertaining to being able to secure a financial deal. So if you have been waiting on somebody, you know, paying you for something, or you needing some kind of money to come in so you can pay something off, this can get triggered during that time. But I'm more so thinking this is going to be like irritable tummy stuff. I have a feeling that it can also be some anxiousness. And you really want to pay attention to what's going on with the mind and kind of calming the mind so you're not having some of these problems. However, the moon will trine Saturn in your 4th house. So if you're releasing a home or financing a home, transforming a home, renovating a home, you might be securing the financing for that. And it can also mean that there is some sudden shift that it brings on some kind of ending, where it ends your relationship with somebody financially, or it ends your relationship with a bank or an institution. That's the other way that I look at it, because the 8th house is the money that you save. You may find that you have to dip into your savings for some reason as well. But the good news is that to me, it seems like making money, you know, by spending money. So maybe it's a matter of paying something off and then, you know, you're having like a balance on something that comes through. Obviously, this is all also squaring Neptune in your 5th. So be very, very careful, Scorpios, with gambling, taking chances, investing in the market, because I do see where there's lots of luck with Jupiter and Neptune in your 5th house, but I also feel like there can be a sense of a loss because the 8th house is a loss. So going and betting it all on a sports team or putting it all on a certain color, I wouldn't do that. And then finally, like I said, it can be more sexual in nature. I think with Mars and the moon in the 8th house and the square to Jupiter and Neptune, it can also be an indication of pregnancy. So that's something I would watch for as well. Let's take a look at what the cards say. Pregnancy, Page of Pentacles. It can be, all right? It doesn't mean that it will be for everybody, because I know there's some Scorpio risings that are like, no way. But Page of Pentacles can be a younger earth sign, but it can also be an indication of an opportunity to invest in something that will grow throughout time. So if you're wanting to put money into like a 401k or like a pension fund, if you're wanting to set money aside in a retirement account, like anything like that, that's going to pay out over a longer period of time, you'll do that. You might also be reading up, studying, and learning more about how to have better financial security. And you're like learning how to manage your resources better and how to make your money grow. And in order to do that, you may have to set some of it aside, or you may be kind of cutting down and tackling your debt. But yes, younger people can come. We can see Virgos and Capricorns and Tauruses being a part of this in some way. So if you do have younger people with those signs in your life, watch for that, or it can be a new sexy romantic partner. Okay? Good luck, Scorpio. For Sag and Sag rising, you have a full moon in Gemini in your natal 7th house. Wowzers. So obviously the 7th house, Gemini, is your opposite sign, right? So like I've said in previous videos, you're feeling yourself. You've had the sun and Venus and Mercury moving through your sign. So there's a lot of, what do I love? What do I think? You know, where am I going? Look at me. Versus the Mars retrograde in your 7th, which means you're reevaluating relationships. Some people from the past have come back, right? Or you're realizing that there's like more combativeness that's going on in some of your relationships, or you're cutting relationships potentially. Now, when we have a full moon in general, sometimes in the 7th house, that is a turning point where it's like, okay, we are reaching a climax in this relationship. It either needs to go to the next step or we need to be done. So some Sagittarius risings, or those of you guys who are having the full moon Placidus in your 7th, you will find that there can be some kind of conflict with a partner. Not always, but it can. Now, Mars rules your 5th house of children, and it also deals with creativity and pleasure and having fun. And Mars rules your 12th house of what is hidden and unseen. So when we factor those two together, it makes me feel like there can be like some frustrations that come out of the blue unexpectedly that you didn't see coming from a romantic partner. It can also mean that you have a romantic partner that is dealing with like an injury or some mental stress or psychological stress. You might hash it out and have some conflict with the child if you have a kid, or there can be a lot of back and forth that you're having with a partnership about just issues relating to childhood or whether or not you're feeling loved or feeling appreciated, because Mars rules the 5th house. So as Mars goes retrograde, you can be like, well, where's the love? I'm not getting the love and the affection that I need. Now, the opposition between your sign and Mars also makes me feel like you're basically telling partners like, I do care about you. I do like have feelings for you, or I love you. Like, what do you need from me? And you can be feeling like people are just kind of exploding. And it doesn't need to be limited to romantic partners. This can be your therapist. This can be your business partner. This can be a client. Other people in general are just going to be combative. I mean, you've already probably seen it, so you don't need me to tell you. But as this full moon perfects, and also the squares to Jupiter and Neptune, it can have you feeling very sensitive and very clouded and confused about the future, especially in regards to your home life or just, you know, your emotional well-being in general. The fact that the ruler has just moved into the 2nd house makes me feel like you're a lot more sensitive when it comes to your money and your resources and like whether or not those are secure as a result of some of the friction that's going on with other people. But it can be feast or famine here. I've seen some people get engaged. I've seen some people get married. I've seen some people also like meet very significant partners under a full moon in the 7th. The good thing is that it does trine Saturn, right? And Saturn is in a sextile to your ascendant if you're a Sag rising. So you really want to lean on that Saturn in the 3rd house and like learn when to speak and when to listen. Maybe writing them a letter, right, can be better, or leaving them a voicemail. It also means like if you're feeling a little stressed, like going for a drive, going for a walk, clearing your head, and then coming back to the table and sitting down and talking to them and being able to kind of discuss what has happened. For some of you guys, it's also talking about planning a trip, planning travel, or possibly planning a move. That's the other positive way that you can use this. Let's take a look and see which way it's going to go for you, Sag, on this full moon. 10 of Wands. I wonder if this is like, movement. You know, 10 of Wands is like picking everything up and going somewhere, having like a really heavy burden to carry. Feeling like, okay, you're willing to take on the challenge, and whether that's just like talking somebody down or making plans to relocate, like something about this makes me feel like you're finally completing a very long period of trying to kind of get something done. Maybe you've been planning a wedding and you're getting ready to, you know, come to the end and everything is like ready to go. Maybe you've also been working on securing a partnership and negotiating a deal, and you're finally sitting down and having somebody sign the paperwork. Regardless, like you're exhausted. The 10 of Wands tells me that you've been pushing really hard, and now that you're at the end, it's like you're not willing to kind of like trip or fall or like let everything fall apart. You really want to see it through. So to me, it seems like you're really dedicated and you're willing to, with that 10, work with the energy of Saturn and communicate to people what's most important. So you're feeling like you're not losing some of the more important relationships in your life. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful for you. That's a positive card, to be honest with you, considering the aspects. For Capricorn, Capricorn rising, we have a full moon taking place in Gemini, and it's in your natal 6th house. It's going to be conjunct Mars, okay? So the 6th house is all about your pets, your coworkers, your office space, your to-do list, getting things done. It's also about your health and your diet. So for you to be having a full moon here, it creates some sense of completion in this area. So you might go, okay, I am finally seeing the results at the gym, or it's time for me to go and get the results from my physical, or it's time for me to schedule like a checkup, right? Especially if there's anything involving like recovery from burns or cuts or broken bones. I could also see like pets needing more attention during this time with the moon and Mars, because the moon can be dogs in some certain situations. Now, Mars rules your 4th house of home and family, and it also rules your 11th house of friends and goals. So it is possible that you're just like on a cleaning spree. You know, you're like, I need to clear all this stuff out, and I'm cleaning out the kitchen, and I don't want to, you know, like I don't want to leave any dust anywhere. And getting your space in order, or getting ready to move, and you're preparing to move. That's the other way that I can look at that. Some of you guys might be just settling in during the time of the full moon. But because it rules family and goals, you may find like there's just more of a need for you to be communicating and talking to your family about your schedule and what you can and cannot do, or what you do or do not have time for. Helping or assisting family members with health-related issues and getting them to specialists can definitely come up as well. But you may find that there's friends that jump in and they're willing to assist you. So if you're like, hey, I'm having a procedure, I need to get a ride, can you help me? Friends will be likely to jump in and be willing to offer their support. Watch for indigestional issues. Watch for foods that are too hot in temperature and foods that are too spicy as well, because it can create some issues here. With the oppositions to planets in your 12th house, you are one of the signs that are more prone to having accidents. So accidents is the 6th, you have Mars retrograde there, and it's in oppositions to planets in your 12th. So it's like if you are prepping your food and you cut your finger, you're more likely to end up having to go to the ER and having somebody take a look at it and having that kind of sutured. You guys know I'm always going to tell you when I see that stuff. I also feel like you need to be really, really careful with driving. Texting and driving is always a no-no, but really with this square, you want to be careful. Respiratory issues can come up, especially because you've got Jupiter and Neptune in your 3rd. Also just mental stress, which leads to not really paying attention and then having an accident or tripping and falling. Especially vehicles though, or like going up and down stairs kind of makes me feel like that's a thing also because of the trines to Saturn. As a result of getting health results back, if that's what happens, I think the trine to Saturn is where you tweak your diet, you make the changes that you need to make. And because you've got so many planets that are going through your 12th house, this is right before your birthday, Capricorn. So there is this cosmic clearing that happens every year, right around this time. You're going to feel better when the planets are going to get into Capricorn. You're going to find that you're going to use the Mercury retrograde later in the month of December to rework how you're thinking, what your goals are, or heal in some way. So knock on wood, we don't want any health issues happening, and watch for changes happening in the office space, changes to your schedule. It might even be that, you know, you have changes with coworkers, so there can be some friction with a coworker. The 6th house can be enemies, so I want you guys to be mindful that enemies are not limited to just who you're working with. Because Mars rules your 4th house, it can be enemies from the past or conflict with family. Let's see what the cards say for you. Ooh, 5 of Wands. This would definitely be fighting words. Could be 5 of Swords too, but combativeness, friction, you know, conflict, feeling like somebody is attacking you. It can be at work or really attacking your patterns or your habits. I feel like if those of you guys who have cut smoking, because I know a lot of Cap risings or Capricorn suns have quit smoking during this transit, you can be a little bit more agitated, and there can be a sense of like that kind of coming out because you don't have an outlet. So if you're trying to avoid confrontation and combativeness and conflict, I think it's important for you guys to have an outlet. So Mars and the moon can mean like, okay, I'm going to the gym, I'm going for a run, you know, I'm gonna go and journal in my room for an hour, I'm gonna rearrange the furniture. Find an outlet to put that into so you're not having the conflict, which looks honestly like it's inevitable, like it's coming, but you can diffuse that if you feel like you have an outlet before it even shows up. Good luck, Capricorn. And for Aquarius and Aquarius rising, you have got a full moon in your 5th house. 5th house is fun, romance, anything in regards to hobbies, taking chances, gambling, all the fun stuff. And it is conjunct Mars. So Mars rules your career, and Mars also rules your 3rd house of communication, travel, and online. I feel like Aquariuses have an opportunity here to really make some shifts and some changes in regards to what makes them happy, expressing what makes them happy, being able to have time for like a little short weekend vacay to go and like let your inner child run free, like a great transit to be like, I'm going to a theme park, I'm throwing a party, right? Like I'm gonna go and, you know, participate in sports, something that's gonna allow you to have that outlet in the 5th house. You may have to get out of town to do it. You may call up a friend or a neighbor or a sibling to be like, hey, do you want to do this thing with me? Equally, if you have like an online business or if you have a business locally, especially something that you own personally and that you write or you create something, it can mean that there's something new that's emerging, like a new service that you're getting ready to release, and letting other people know what you've created. Now, the 5th house is also about sex, but more for fun, meeting people, falling in love. But it can also be an indication of full moon in the 5th house of pregnancy. So some people may find out they're pregnant. Some people may be trying to get pregnant. The Mars retrograde there is a long period of trying if you're trying, or just reworking something about your love life. And somebody may come back to you, right? I feel like with Saturn trine, it's more about you having more responsible ways of having fun and not feeling like you have to go to bars or other things in order to have a good time. It might mean that you're looking for like a more traditional way to be dating and connecting with other people. Obviously, all these planets in Sagittarius is super goal-oriented, very social, but these planets are coming into squares with the mutable angles, okay? So Jupiter and Neptune being the focal point. You are also one of those signs that I would recommend. Don't take any financial chances. Investing in a slot machine or, the lottery or, just taking a chance with investments in general, it may not pay off. But by the same token, big risk, big reward, because this is all squaring Jupiter and Neptune in your 2nd house. So you might feel like you're really passionate. You got to do something. You got to say something. You got to launch something. And you end up getting really lucky and it ends up bringing you some kind of abundance. But I think you're taking chances more in regards to your career and going more in the direction of creative ventures and feeling like you're taking a sidestep from a more kind of traditional or fixated way of working, and you're learning to integrate more Gemini things. So whether it's communication, sports, blogging, whatever, those things can pay off if you're learning to work with Saturn, right? If that makes sense. Love life can be super amazing. So it can be really passionate, somebody who's really pursuing you if you're single, or just meeting someone. And if you have children already, this can be a time where your kids are like wild things. They're just running around yelling and screaming, or they're fighting, or there's something that's kind of going on, and you may have to show a little bit more of like your authority, in the house and kind of reprimand them and tell them kind of what's up. And you might have to really lean into that Saturn and crack the whip. Not literally, okay, figuratively. I know there's going to be some people that are going to be like, what? Figuratively. It's using your adult phrases like, I'm not mad at you, I'm just disappointed. That's very Saturn trine. All right, let's see what these cards say for you, Aquarius. I get 8 of Cups. Yeah, for some of you guys, if something's not making you happy any longer, because this is about emotions, there's a sense of walking away. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a hobby or if it's a person or if it's a sport that you used to, participate in and you're like, it's not fun anymore. Some of you guys will be walking away from something. I think the fact that it's taking into consideration your 7th house lord, the sun, so it's about relationships and goals, and then you have Mars and the moon in opposition. Like it might be a period of time where you give somebody an ultimatum and you're like, what's it going to be? Is it going to be to this or is it going to be that? And if you don't get a response or if you don't like the way something goes down, you're like, I'm out. Because the full moon in your 5th house is focusing on your happiness. And sometimes there can be a little bit of friction with Mars aspects that's pushing you to really kind of dig deep and ask yourself, what is going to make me the happiest? How am I going to feel the most fulfilled? It's not this. Okay, I got to walk away. And the 8 of Cups is about actually walking away, not doubting yourself, not looking in the rearview mirror, not coming back 2 months later. It's being like, no, I have to make decisions or I have to cut something to protect my own happiness. Okay, good luck. And for my Pisces and Pisces rising, we have a full moon in Gemini taking place in your natal 4th house. It's lit in your astrology right now, all the mutable signs, but it is quite busy for you. Obviously, you've had Mars retrograde in your 4th house, so feeling a little uncomfortable at home or feeling like there's this need to get out of the house or feeling like you need to reorganize or you're trying to move but that's being delayed or you're trying to go back home in some way. A full moon in the 4th house is going to highlight home roots family. So whether it's family that lives across town or your roommates, or it's just family that lives in another place or the past, that's what the 4th house is about. It's your private sector. Now, this is going to be conjunct Mars. So Mars is the ruler of your 9th house and Mars is the ruler of your 2nd house. This makes me feel like you can get caught up in some drama, okay, relating to your home or your family and like legal issues. So things like dealing with a landlord or possibly, going back and forth on a home sale and, holding somebody to a contract and being like, look, this is what we agreed to, because Mars rules the 9th. It can also be that you're trying to relocate and go somewhere further away, or you're trying to get like legal stuff done or permits for homes. There can be some religious or philosophical debates also with family members. And just a little bit of like a back and forth about who owes who what, especially if you feel like something belongs to you. So if you have property that family's staying in or vice versa, it can get kind of heated. Watch for something that's going to be very emotionally triggering, though. I'll tell you that right now. Those of you guys who have had Mars through the 4th, you know what I'm talking about. It's just there's been some tension that's been in the air, either at home or with family. Now, it's all in opposition to all these planets in your 10th house. So you're really focusing on career, what you're doing out in the world. Even though some of you Pisces risings, you feel a little lost, right? Jupiter, Neptune in your 1st house is saying, I'm leaning into, my vision, but I'm really emotional and I'm kind of confused and I'm lost. And like, I don't know where I want to be living or I don't know where I want to be working. That's okay. Focus more on what you can control right now. And I think the 5th house is basically saying if it's time to move, sell a house, relocate, kick out a roommate, move somebody in, like you're going to see very clearly it's time to get the show on the road. But like all the water signs, because it's happening in it's happening in your 4th house and it's trining Saturn in your 12th, you're having to communicate how you feel about endings. And you might be sad or you might be reminiscing a little bit, or there is some sense of like having to kind of let go. So you might be moving away from your hometown or, moving further away from family, and that has you feeling a little bit more isolated or alone. But it can be positive for those of you guys who are looking to secure a home purchase or get a green light and get accepted on a lease. That's the other way that I could see this playing out for you as well. Just watch out for the blind spots, because I think some of you guys might move without securing a job, or you might take a job and then not realize like how far away your job is from home and that the commute is a nightmare. So you have to take that into consideration, the differences between where and how you're working and also where you're living. Mom stuff can come up here too, but Mars is retrograde, so it can be that there's some squabbles with like a parent in regards to money or housing. Let's see what the cards say for you. I get the 6 of Wands. Excuse me, the 7 of Wands. 7 of Wands is about standing your ground, right? So in some certain situations, it's like if somebody's in your space and they're not being, appropriate, or they're being kind of combative, it's like being like, get out of my house. So that literally can happen. I also feel that when you have the Mars retrograde going on here, as long as you have like a list of to-do and you're working on your home space, you're less likely to have conflict either with your family or have like people who can kind of intrude. Because in some certain situations, I've seen intruders. I don't think that's the case here. I think that this is just more about you being on high alert, making sure doors are locked, making sure garages are closed. If you need to put out a sign that's like, I have a dog and the dog will bite, whatever you have to do to let them know you don't want to come in here, because if you come in here, I'm going to defend myself. But not necessarily just physically, emotionally too. This is being a little bit more emotionally on guard and aware that there can be some things that can kind of trigger you. Or that, there's been so much friction between you and a relative or you and a roommate that it's just better to go your separate ways and diffuse the situation. Regardless, you're not backing down, okay? And this doesn't mean that you need to be combative, but you're definitely putting on your game face and you're being a little bit more fierce in regards to what it is that you need, and you're not willing to let other people push you around. Full moon in your 4th. Watch out for that drama with the family. That can definitely be a thing. But I like the fact that it's trining Saturn and it's giving you the opportunity to just clear everything out if that's what needs to happen. All right, guys, I'm wishing you a very happy full moon. You guys have gotten this information early, so do with it what you will. That way you can use it positively. Remember, Write down all your frustrations, write down everything you want to release, burn it, let it go. You can do that anytime on the 8th or the 9th. It's going to be happening on the 8th in the evening though. And let me know below, how are you feeling with this energy? Is it aspecting something in your chart? Is it your birthday? Is it your Mars or your lunar return? Guys, if you have your Mars or your moon there, very important to look at those lunar returns. You can join me on Saturday nights. I do live readings, tarot and astrology. Would love to take a look at that for you if you have questions. It's all by donation. I'll be back. We're going to be doing, I believe we're doing tarot this week, if I remember correctly. No, astrology. Hello. I'll put it in my Sunday video. Don't worry about it. Mars retrograde. I'm already talking ahead of myself. And I hope you guys enjoy the full moon. Leave me your comments below. I'd love to hear how it's going. And I will see you all very soon. Take care.